On the left is the original unedited raw file. On the right is the final image after several Photoshop adjustments. Every tweak made along the way dramatically changed the data in the histogram. In this lesson, we are going to look at a variety of photos to see exactly how different Photoshop adjustments shift and reshape the histogram in real time. This image of the chapel ramp has high contrast and very bright red in the rocks. So I want to use this as a demonstration of the effects of saturation of color on the histogram. And right now you can see up here in the luminosity histogram that the histogram is not clipped at either side, and it's distributed across the whole range. There is a peak here, which is saying that there's a dark area where there's a greater portion of the luminosity. But what I want to do right now is open up a adjustment layer, and I'm coming down here to adjustment layers, and I'm looking at hue and saturation, and I'm going to open that up, and it comes over to here in our panel. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the saturation all the way to -100. And what that has done is basically it's given me a black and white image. And now you can see all the color channels are basically a copy of the luminosity channel. So I'm going to start increasing the saturation, and we can watch what happens to the histograms as we do that. And you will notice that the color channels are starting to change in relationship to the luminosity channel. And when I get back here to 0, which is the photo is shot, you can see that the luminosity for the red channel is biased toward the right, or the brightness, so it's a very bright red. The green is the color that our eyes are most sensitive to, and that's biased toward the shadows, and it does have some actual shadow clipping here. And the same thing is true of the blue, even though the blue contributes very little to the luminosity channel. In this image we have a lot of vibrant colors and very distinct: red, blue, green, very visible in this image. So I've started off here where we're showing the color histogram, and you can see how the colors are distributed across this. And come down here, we can see how red histogram looks. It looks very similar to this in shape. Green is a bit different, and blue again is even more different. So what I want to do is I want to open a layer, another adjustment layer, and we're going to do curves. Now a curve is a line here that can be shaped. We're going to make this real simple for the demo. So I'm going to come up here. We're currently showing red, green, and blue here. And I'm going to change this to where we're just This curve only affects the red channel. So now as I move this, change that curve, you can see the red histogram change quite a bit. It's going up, going down, and you can see it moves either toward the highlights or towards the shadows, depending on how I move it. And there's all kinds of variations you can do with curves. So right now, again, I ask you to just look at the image itself as I do this. And you can see certain things brighten up and others get darker. We're only using the curve for a small portion of the histograms. So that's it for this image, and we'll move on to the next. Our third image is of a motorcycle that was captured at the Gold King mine in Jerome, Arizona. It's basically a huge junkyard of a lot of fascinating vehicles and just general items of with a great deal of character. It's a great place for a photographer to spend a day and grab some unusual shots. In this case, there was an extreme amount of clutter in the background here. So I isolated this and made the entire background black to help accentuate the motorcycle. Now in doing that, you end up with a histogram that is going to be clipped on the left in the shadows, no matter what you do, and that's fine because it's part of the image. It's supposed to be there. So the clipping in this image is not a problem at all, and we know the reason for it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up another adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to use levels. Now in levels you can just pull stuff in from the shadows, and basically you're cutting off the shadow portion from the data. You can also do the same thing from the highlights if there's a little bit of brightness there. But in this case, what I wanted to do was work with the midtones. So as we watch both the image and the histograms, as I move this midtone toward the shadows, we can see the histograms and the color channels and the luminosity change quite a bit. They create what is often referred to as combs, and so they're these stacks of pixels that measure a particular portion of the spectrum, going from, again, there's 255 bars across here. And it's not always apparent, like up here when it's pretty solid, it's not apparent, but as we start playing with things like this, it becomes more apparent, and they call it combs because you can see the gaps between them. And now I went to the shadows, and now I'm going to go toward the highlights. And you can see the histograms change quite a bit. And also notice how the image itself changes. Either brightens up the shadows or it tones down the highlights. So this is another adjustment you can use in Photoshop.
And again, you can use it like any of the other adjustments to fine tune your image. And I'm just flicking at the levels adjustment on and off so you can see the difference there. Okay, time for the next image. This image of a mountain lion was taken at the crack of dawn. The sun was just peeking up over the mountains, and you can see the lighting here on the fur on the underside. And so it's generally not a very bright image. So as we look at the histogram, we see it's the most of the image data is to the shadow side, with very little in the highlights here. But we can also see that there's no real clipping either in the shadows or the highlights. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we got all the data that could have been that we could have gotten. This gap here, there was, if we had pushed the exposure a bit darker so that this got closer to the clipping, there would probably be more data that we would have had here that we could have pulled out. But as it is, it's not bad. We have a lot of detail in the fur and in the expression, the eyes, even the tongue here shows up pretty well. So that part's okay. And now what I'm going to do again, I'm going to play with the levels and particularly the midtones, and just move them and see how it changes things. And if we move the midtones toward the shadows, you can see it lightened up the image quite a bit. And now this main mountain is more toward the center. But we also get that combing effect we talked about before in the different colors. So basically this is just showing another application of a levels adjustment and how I can shift the histogram. So we'll now go to the next image. This image is a close-up of the canyon wall in West Fork. So it was taken in this area. This is not the best perspective to see it, but anyway, it was right in this area here that we're looking at the color and texture of the wall. And now I'm just going to close that out so that we have a histogram just for this close-up. And as you can see, there's a lot of texture, a lot of color, but there's it's fairly evenly distributed from the shadows to the highlights, and predominantly it's toward the midpoint. So there's a lot of mid-tone data here. But you can see in the colors, it's not as evenly distributed. The red tends to be brighter, and the blue is the darkest. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open another adjustment layer, curves. And we're going to show a little more contrast here. So this line, this is covering all three of these. It's for RGB. And we're going to grab this. We're going to grab a point toward the shadows and we're going to pull down. And we're going to grab a point toward the highlights and we're going to pull up. And by giving this S shape to the curve, we get a more evenly distributed histogram here. Again, I go and show the original, and now what we have more evenly distributed. This final image was taken under a full moon, so all this lighting on Courthouse Rock, or Courthouse Butte, whatever you prefer to call it, is actually the light of the full moon. And the sky is a bit brightened around the horizon here, but have a lot of dark sky up top. And we have some darkness here in the bushes and all. A very dark spot here. So when we look at the histogram in general, it's going to be very biased toward the shadows. Very little in the light, but what is in the light area is going to be in midtones, this rock formation. So I've added a levels layer here where we can play around with the slider a bit and just see how the histogram changes if we move first toward the shadows. This is putting the midtones toward the shadows and then changing it toward the highlights. And I just want to make a comment about this. It always seemed to me to be a little backward where I move toward the highlights and it's getting darker, and vice versa when I move towards the shadows it's getting brighter. But what's actually happening is that, like if I move toward the highlights now, the shadows, the midtone and shadows is going to be represented by everything left of this slider, and the highlights are going to be by everything right of the slider. And that's why as you move to the left, you're decreasing the amount of luminosity coming from shadows and increasing coming from the highlights. So I just want to make that comment. Anyway, this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found some value here.